The Australian Financial Review.
Instead of a 50-50 relationship where everyone's looking for equity and balance, the 80-80 marriage was just an amazing aha moment. A lot of people assume that a CEO needs to be perfect or complete as an end-to-end leader in every respect, and I think that's just fundamentally flawed.
Hi, I'm Sally Patton, editor of Boss from the Australian Financial Review, and welcome to 15 Minutes with the Boss, a podcast about success and failure and everything in between, and along the way we're hoping to get some really great advice from our leaders. My guest today is Jason Johnson, the founder and CEO of Johnson Partners. Hi Jason, how are you?
Hi Sally, great to be here.
Thank you so much for coming in. Now, Jason, as I said, you're the CEO of Johnson Partners, which is an executive recruitment firm. Over the past 20 years, you've appointed 2,000 executives and 500 directors to organisations across Australia. You have a staff of 34, and some of your major clients include Westpac and Super Retail Group, which owns Rebel Sport, and the outdoor clothing company Macpac. And I believe your firm is growing pretty quickly, so congratulations. And I'm sure you've got lots of advice on job hunting for senior executives, so I'm looking forward to a little bit of advice later on.
I look forward to sharing it.
On that note, our time starts now. The clock is running. My first question is about your morning routine. What happens? What does it look like? What time do you get up?
Thanks, Sally. I've always been an early riser.
Another early riser.
So it normally has a 4 in front of it.
A 4?
I'll be out of bed. I have a 6-year-old son, 4 children, a 6-year-old son, Jagger, who often joins me in the 5s for breakfast. And I'll often drop Jagger early to school and then head off, if it's one of my work from home days, for a run round the headland at Bondi.
For what do you get up for?
I like to read the newspapers, so I'll read the New York Times pretty much front to back and the AFR front to back, somewhere between 4 and 5:30 in the morning, and then I kind of have some intentional time to reflect on the day ahead.
And how long would you spend doing that?
3 or 4 minutes where I reflect on what's required of me and how I need to show up. And that I find really grounding and just helps set up the day.
So then you'll have breakfast with your son at 5 something?
5:30, 6 o'clock typically. And if I'm eating that morning, I would eat breakfast most mornings, but I fast 1 or 2 mornings a week, which I find is a really great way of just resetting the body, particularly after the weekend.
And then you go for a jog once you get to the office?
Well, I work from home typically 2 days a week, and that balance has been really lovely. So on those days, I can get out around the headland, and I find that an incredibly meditative period. For me, that's one of the periods in my week where I just let the mind go, and it's a very reflective time, and some of my best thinking comes on that headland.
Interesting. Okay. Next, tell me about a pivotal moment in your career, something that happened, a project perhaps that you took on that changed the trajectory of what you were doing.
The most fundamental change for me, I started life as a lawyer and had the privilege of working for Allen and Hemsley, as it was, and now Allen's. Great law firm, a great place to learn, but I didn't feel my life purpose being really energised and enabled in that role, notwithstanding the great mentors and great work I had to do. And as a 28-year-old, I made probably the most mature decision and impactful decision of my life, which was to step out of a great law firm and legal career into the executive search industry. And from a career perspective, put aside some of the family decisions I've made, it was fundamentally life-changing. I loved engaging with people. The practice of law is less about people-centric engagement. And when I found my way to the executive search industry, I felt my life purpose kind of was met.
So why did you go for executive search? What was it about that industry that attracted you?
The thing that is the most rewarding is looking at the organisations, whether it be a major ASX 10 or a for-purpose organisation, and seeing those organisations outperform their competitors in the listed environment, or if they're a for-purpose organisation, deliver to their stakeholders in a way that they had never imagined they were able to do. And, the difference between a good and a great CEO is quite remarkable. And so, building leadership teams, building cohesive, diverse, inclusive leadership teams that then outperform their wildest dreams. That's incredibly exciting when it all comes together well.
Okay, excellent. Next, what is the best piece of career advice you've ever received?
The advice which I now give to people is to be brave and courageous in respect of career. Follow your heart, not just your head and heart. And that was the decision I made as the 28-year-old. If you want to find something that aligns with your sense of purpose, and I talk about life purpose, when you find that alignment, things open in a way that you couldn't imagine. And so I think finding something that you feel both passionate about, where you feel you're really opening to it, where you bring skills and capability or could learn and align with the skills and capability required in that sector, and then to be brave, particularly for younger people. The world's your oyster, so take those brave steps while you have less of the family and other obligations around you, and just step bravely into those to pursue your passions.
And what would you say is your purpose in life, given that you have talked about purpose a bit?
My purpose in the work context is very much around leading people to enable them to achieve their best. I often say to graduates, you can have influence at board and CEO levels. You're invited into boardrooms in your first weeks in the executive search industry. The opportunity for influence and impact is quite amazing. You meet the best and brightest. You learn so much working with organisations of all different shapes, sizes, ownership structures, and you get to have the greatest possible impact, which is building leadership teams or boards for organisations. McKinsey writes great strategy. PwC does great accounting work. Allens does great legal work, but none of those impact an organisation in the same way that a great executive search firm does.
Interesting. Okay, I love that. All right, on that note, we're going to take a short break, but don't go away. We will come back, I promise, and we're going to open our delightful chatterbox. Welcome back to 15 Minutes with the Boss. I'm here with Jason Johnson, the CEO of Johnson Partners. Now, Jason, as promised, here is our chatterbox session. In front of you is this brown box with about 15 questions. Have a fish. We're going to start another Q&A section. No, I get to read the questions. Thanks very much. What's your favourite podcast or streaming show and why?
Yeah, my wife, Portia, is a relationship counsellor, and Portia ensures that I have a ready series of podcasts around relationships. And relationships are not just about your romantic, relationship. You can draw so many parallels back into the workplace. So I would say a number of those have been revelatory for me and
so what have you
made me a
learned?
better leader. Well, I guess at its core, it's about being vulnerable, being authentic. I grew up probably demonstrating less of each of those attributes. And, as I have matured, both as a father and a leader, they are both so important to the really honest fabric of whether it be the family or the work relationships that I have.
Interesting. And can you point to one or two that have really benefited you or that you've really liked?
So I read the book rather than I did listen to the podcast as well, the 80-80 marriage. And that talks about this notion that rather than a relationship, and again, you don't have to think about romantic relationship, but it's certainly very relevant for that. But instead of a 50-50 relationship where everyone's looking for equity and balance, just to have radical generosity in what you do. And that for me was just an amazing aha moment. So, at a very trivial level, whether it's unpacking a dishwasher or walking the dog or taking the kids to school or whatever that element of the family contribution is, to do it with an open heart and just in such generous spirit. And then all that sort of measuring of contribution just washes away. And I think that's incredibly powerful.
That is a really, really lovely idea, an 80-80 relationship where you're giving 80% of yourself. You're not just hanging around to try and make sure it's an absolute equilibrium. Give more.
Indeed. And there are some days where you'll have 80% to give and other days where you'll have 20% to give. And that's when you need to just call out to your partner or your colleague at work and say, look, today I just don't have the energy, but I'll be there for you tomorrow. And it's just this notion that you're kind of constantly regulating and giving more when possible. And it just lights up relationships.
Fantastic. I love it. Okay. Have another fish in the box.
Thank you.
What are some of the mistakes that even very senior people make when they go to an interview? I assume that even senior people must make mistakes from time to time.
It happens frequently. And, I think the thing to remember is that any recruitment process, no matter how senior, whether it's the CEO of a major bank in Australia or a telco, there still needs to be a degree of romance in that you've got two parties that want to build rapport and actually be invested in the process. And sometimes people, feel they need to be a bit standoffish to, demonstrate they're not too keen or they're still in a due diligence phase or exploratory
So they don't make
phase.
enough of an effort to develop a rapport with somebody.
Indeed, and there's lack of enthusiasm that's demonstrated, and then there might be a sense of lack of conviction. So I would always...
Sounds like a teenage romance, actually.
Indeed. And so I would always say to someone that's going for a really meaningful interview, prepare for it and show up like you really want the role. You can always turn down the opportunity, but you're actually going to get the best out of that by turning up and showing up as though you want it. And people on the other side want to feel that energy. They want to feel the conviction. They want to feel your vision, the ideas that you've got, rather than you sitting there and just sort of being a sponge. And I've seen some very, very talented people that just mismanage that part and then be surprised when they're not invited to move forward.
And to what extent would executives be required to say what they would do if they got the job, like have a 12-month plan or a bit of a vision for what they would do?
Yeah, so when we run CEO succession processes, that's a very fundamental part of the process.
And below the CEO?
Yes, often. If you're talking about a significant C-suite role, then you'll often get them to present a plan or a vision or ideas. But at the CEO level, we'll often choreograph a approach where they're presenting to the board. It's a synthetic board situation, but nevertheless, it's the closest to reality, a CEO presenting a new strategy. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, their vision for the organisation. So, I think we often design similar processes for other C-suite roles, but it's absolutely fundamental in those CEO processes.
And do you ask people of all levels or do you encourage people of all levels to ask questions during the interview of the company? Yes,
absolutely. In fact, I think that's really important, that they demonstrate their maturity. They demonstrate that they've done the research and homework and that they're actually curious. I think for young people, and we hire a bunch of grads each year, the ones that we're most drawn to are those that are curious, that do turn up and ask questions, and they're really thoughtful questions nowadays. And quite a few of them are using AI now to help them prepare for interviews. And the quality of questions we're getting from some of the younger people is quite breathtaking.
So do you recommend that even sort of fairly senior leaders use AI to help them formulate questions or help them formulate part of their interview?
Absolutely. I would be, we use Copilot in our organisation. I'd be using Copilot to give me a set of interview questions. I would, after having done an analysis on the organisation, I would have had it scan the annual report, scan investor presentations, and then maybe pose it as an analyst and ask me as an analyst to ask me a series of questions about the organisation. So the AI tools are incredible now, and I think any senior exec or board member going through a process like this could get a lot of value from that.
Fantastic. I love that. Okay, have a fish. Jason, let's have another question. What's a misconception that people have about CEOs?
A lot of people assume that a CEO needs to be perfect or complete as an end-to-end leader in every respect. And I think that's just fundamentally flawed. When we, as an executive search firm, work with a client, we're thinking about the complementarity of skills and the diversity of thought around a leadership team. And the CEO is about bringing all of that together, but doesn't have to be a fully formed person, in every respect. You can always augment if they're not strong on financial acumen. You can always ensure that you've got a great CFO alongside them, or if, as we find sometimes, particularly in some of the tech industries, you find someone who may not have the same level of EQ and familiarity with dealing with sort of scale people issues, then make sure they've got a great CPO that sort of brings heart and empathy. And so, I think the just making sure that whatever environment is around a CEO complements them and makes them, it's the unity of the team that makes the whole, not the CEO themselves.
And so they don't need to be perfect or the full picnic themselves.
Indeed. And I think this notion that you have to be a Pollyanna CEO, that nothing's ever wrong, I think, we're beyond that now. Let's just have honest conversations, and the market prefers that, customers prefer that, staff prefer that. When we're looking for the ideal CEO, we want someone that can have that authentic level of dialogue with all stakeholders.
Okay, yeah, that's good advice. On that note, Jason, the Chatterbox section is now over and done with. Well done.
Thank you.
I now have one last question which we ask all our guests, and that is, if you weren't the CEO of Johnson Partners, what would you be doing?
One of the things that I reflect on is that I haven't maintained my core friendships in the way that I could have. And I'm really reflective about the next phase. I want to make sure that I'm a better friend and a more consistent friend.
So do you think, could you see yourself doing another business?
I would probably find myself mentoring others to be successful in their businesses. And I think I'd have a lot to give. There aren't that many people who have been successful building firms in this part of the region that have had the success that our firms had. And so I'd love to impart some of those learnings and many of the mistakes I've made, so that others wouldn't make those same mistakes and could just have a more accelerated and hopefully more seamless path.
All the while being a better friend.
Indeed.
Excellent. I love that. On that note, congratulations. The time is up. Jason, I really, really love the books and the podcasts that your wife has clearly given you, and that idea of radical friendship, radical generosity. Don't just go for the equilibrium. Try and give more of yourself. I love that.
Indeed.
I really love that. I love your advice to be brave. Put your foot on the pedal. Don't worry. Just go ahead. Be brave. I really like your advice for even senior leaders to go in and work at developing a rapport with the interviewer. Act as if you want the job. Act keen. Don't sit back and pretend or look as if you don't really want the job, and prepare hard. I love that. And I wish you lots of luck with your new sailing venture. And also, I'm sure you will indeed take lots more care of your friends. So thank you so much for allowing us to spend 15 minutes with the boss. It has been absolutely fantastic.
Thank you, Sally. It's been great to be here.
And thank you to everyone for listening. If you like the podcast and would like to hear more, consider sharing the podcast or writing a review, as it helps us to reach more people. And follow us wherever you get your podcasts. At the Financial Review, we investigate the big stories about markets, business and power. For more, go to afr.com, and you can subscribe to the Financial Review, the daily habit of successful people, at afr.com/subscribe. This podcast was hosted by me, Sally Patton, and produced by Lap Fan and Martin Peralta. Our theme is by Alex Gow, our head of podcast is Lap Fan, and the head of premium content is Fiona Buffini.
The Australian Financial Review.